My wedding night was the night I died. The sound of laughter still lingered in the air, distant yet sharp, like echoes trapped inside crystal walls. Champagne glasses clinked somewhere far below, a soft, celebratory melody blending with the fading orchestra, as if the entire world was still toasting to a love story that had already begun to rot. The lights in the bridal suite were warm, golden, almost unreal, casting a soft glow over the silk sheets, the scattered rose petals, the delicate lace curtains that swayed ever so slightly with the night breeze. Everything was perfect, too perfect, like a stage carefully prepared for a tragedy. And I sat there, at the center of it all, still wearing my wedding dress, the white fabric flowing down around me like a cage I had willingly stepped into. My fingers tightened slightly over the edge of the bed, nails pressing into the softness beneath me, as if grounding myself in reality. This was real. This was my wedding night. I was finally Mrs. Caldwell, the name I had chased, protected, sacrificed for, the name that would soon destroy me. The door clicked open behind me. My heart skipped, just for a second. I turned, slowly, hope flickering in my chest like a fragile flame refusing to die. Ryan stepped in, tall, composed, still in his formal suit, his presence filling the room instantly. For a moment, everything felt right. This was how it was supposed to be. Husband and wife, a beginning. But then his phone rang. That sound, sharp, intrusive, cut straight through the silence like a blade. Ryan frowned slightly, pulling his phone out, glancing at the screen. And in that single moment, I saw it. The change. His expression froze, then drained. His face turned pale, the warmth gone as if it had never existed. Something inside me sank. Hello? His voice was low, tense. A pause. Then his grip tightened. What? How bad is it? My heartbeat began to pound, louder, faster, drowning out the distant music, drowning out everything. I didn't need to hear the name. I already knew. Of course it was her. It had always been her. I'll be there immediately. He hung up. The room fell into a suffocating silence. He didn't look at me right away, didn't say anything, just stood there for half a second, like he was already somewhere else. Then he turned. Sophia was in an accident. There it was. My chest tightened, but I forced my voice to stay steady. Ryan, tonight is our wedding night. The words felt fragile as they left my lips, like they might shatter before reaching him. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes. Hesitation. Conflict. But it disappeared almost instantly, swallowed by something stronger, something I could never compete with. She needs me. 4 simple words. 4 words that erased everything. I stood up slowly, the fabric of my dress whispering against the floor, the sound unbearably loud in the silence between us. And what about me? My voice was softer now, thinner, barely holding together. I'm your wife. He looked at me then, but not really at me. His gaze passed through me, as if I were already fading, already irrelevant. This is different. Different. I almost laughed. Different? The word echoed hollowly in my mind. My fingers curled slightly at my sides, trembling, but I forced myself not to break. Not yet. Not in front of him. So no matter when she calls, I swallowed, forcing the next words out. You'll always go. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. And just like that, I understood. I had never been the choice, only the obligation. Only the convenient answer to a life he wanted to stabilize, but never truly share. He grabbed his coat. No hesitation now, no looking back. I'll come back later. A lie. We both knew it. He walked past me, the faint scent of his cologne brushing against me for the briefest second before it faded, just like everything else. I didn't move, didn't try to stop him. Not this time. The door opened, then closed. A sharp final sound that echoed through the room like a verdict. And then, nothing. The music from downstairs was gone, or maybe I just couldn't hear it anymore. The world had gone silent. My breath came out uneven, shaky, as if I had forgotten how to breathe properly. Slowly, I turned back toward the bed, toward the carefully arranged flowers, the candles, the life that was supposed to begin tonight. Again. The word slipped out, barely audible. My lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, not quite anything human. Even on our wedding night. My eyes burned, but no tears fell. Not yet. You still chose her. The realization settled deep inside my chest, cold and heavy, spreading like ice through my veins. This wasn't the first time. It had never been the first time. And it wouldn't be the last. The world blurred slightly as memories began to fracture and overlap. Arguments, cold silences, the way his attention always drifted elsewhere, always toward her. Sophia. The name felt like poison. The room around me began to feel suffocating, the walls closing in, the air too thick to breathe. I reached up, my fingers brushing against the delicate lace of my veil, then slowly pulled it off. It slipped from my hand, falling to the floor like something discarded, something meaningless, just like me. Time passed. I didn't know how much. Minutes, hours, it didn't matter. The lights dimmed, the candles burned lower, the night deepened, and still he didn't come back. Of course he didn't. A hollow laugh escaped my lips, soft and broken. What was I expecting? I whispered to no one. My chest ached, but the pain felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else, as if I had already begun to detach from it, from everything. And then, darkness. Not sudden, not violent, just slow, creeping, inevitable, like sinking into deep water. Images flickered, sharp, fragmented, merciless. Papers thrown onto a table, accusations, embezzlement. The word echoed, heavy and suffocating. Faces twisted in disgust. His family, my so-called family. Eyes that once looked at me with polite acceptance, now filled with contempt. We trusted you. You've disgraced the Caldwell name. My hands shaking as I tried to explain, but no one listening, no one believing, not even him. Especially not him. Ryan, you know I would never— Enough! His voice, cold, distant, final. That was the moment something inside me truly broke. Not the wedding night, not even the betrayal, but that, when he chose not to believe me. The divorce papers. The pen felt heavy in my hand. My signature looked unfamiliar, like it belonged to a stranger. Like I was signing away more than just a marriage. I was signing away my life. The house emptied, the warmth gone, the silence heavier than before. The world outside colder than I remembered. Days blurred into nights, nights into nothing. Hunger, exhaustion, loneliness. And then the road. The headlights. Too bright, too fast. The screech of tires, the sound of impact. Pain. Sharp, blinding, then fading just as quickly. My body hitting the ground, the taste of blood. The sky above me dark and endless. My heartbeat slowing, slowing, slowing. So this is how it ends. The thought came quietly, without fear, without resistance. Just acceptance. If there is another life. The darkness closed in, wrapping around me like a final embrace. Let me not love him again. Silence. Then a whisper. Soft, distant, unfamiliar. Reborn. My heart slammed violently against my chest. Air rushed into my lungs as if I had been drowning. My eyes snapped open. The golden light, the silk sheets, the rose petals, the room unchanged. My breath came fast, uneven, my hands gripping the fabric beneath me as I pushed myself upright. The mirror across the room reflected a familiar figure, a bride in a white dress, me. My pupils trembled, widening in disbelief. No. My fingers lifted slowly, touching my face, my skin warm, alive, real. Not broken, not cold, not dead. The silence pressed in around me, but this time it wasn't suffocating. It was waiting. My heart pounded harder, louder, echoing in my ears like a drum signaling the start of something inevitable. My gaze shifted toward the door, toward the moment I knew was about to come. The phone would ring. He would answer. He would leave, just like before. But this time, something inside me was different. The pain was still there, but it had hardened, sharpened, turned into something cold, something dangerous. My lips curved slowly, faintly, not in sadness, not in hope, but in understanding. This time, my voice was barely a whisper. I won't stop you. The handle of the door moved, and the past began again. This time, I won't stop you. The thought lingered in my mind like a quiet vow, cold and unwavering, as I sat there in the exact same position, the same white dress cascading around me, the same golden light wrapping the room in an illusion of warmth that I now knew was nothing more than decoration for a lie. My heartbeat hadn't slowed since I opened my eyes. It was steady but heavy, like every beat carried the weight of 2 lifetimes. I didn't move. I didn't breathe too deeply. I simply waited, because I knew what was coming. I had lived this moment before, and right on cue, the door opened. The sound was identical. The timing was identical. Even the way the air shifted felt the same. Ryan stepped in, composed, elegant, everything about him exactly as it had been minutes before my life fell apart in my previous life. For a split second, my chest tightened, not from love, not anymore, but from the instinct that hadn't yet caught up with reality. Muscle memory. A heart that had once belonged to him, trying to beat the same way again. But I crushed it down, immediately, ruthlessly. He glanced at me, just briefly, as if checking that I was still there, still waiting, still his. That version of me was already gone. "You're still up," he said casually, loosening his cufflinks, his tone light, unaware, untouched by everything I had already endured. I didn't answer. I just watched him. Watched every small movement, every detail I had once overlooked. The distance in his eyes, the subtle impatience, the way his attention never fully settled on me. It was almost laughable now. How had I not seen it before? How had I convinced myself this was love? Then his phone rang. The same sound, sharp, precise, like fate pressing repeat. My fingers tightened slightly against the sheets, but my expression didn't change. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. He frowned, pulling the phone out, and just like before, the moment he saw the name, everything shifted. His face drained of color, his entire body tensed. "Hello?" His voice dropped, urgent, already slipping away from me. A pause. Then, exactly the same words. "What? How bad is it?" I almost smiled. It was perfect, down to the last detail, like a script that couldn't be changed, but I could change. "I'll be there immediately." He ended the call. Silence filled the room again. He didn't look at me right away, just like last time. That half-second pause, where he pretended to consider me, before making a decision he had already made. Sophia was in an accident. There it was, the same line, the same tone, the same choice. Only this time, I felt nothing. No sharp pain, no panic, no desperate urge to hold on to him. Just clarity, pure, cutting clarity. I tilted my head slightly, watching him as if I were observing a stranger. "Then you should go." The words came out smooth, gentle, almost kind. He froze. That was new. His eyes snapped toward me, confusion flashing across his face, as if he had expected resistance, tears, pleading, something messy, something emotional, something that would prove I still cared. I gave him none of it. "What?" he asked, as if he hadn't heard me correctly. I let a small smile curve my lips. Not warm, not loving, just polite, detached. "I said you should go." I adjusted the edge of my dress, my movements slow, graceful, completely at ease. "She needs you, doesn't she?" The silence that followed was different this time, thicker, uneasy. Ryan stared at me, searching my face for something, anything that made sense to him. But I had already stepped outside of the version of me he knew. "Elena," he began, his voice uncertain now. I cut him off softly. "Don't worry about me." My gaze met his, steady and calm. "It's just a wedding night." The words hit harder than I intended. I saw it, the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. Good, let him feel it, even if it was just a fraction of what I had felt. "Are you sure?" he asked, hesitating now in a way he never had before. That almost made me laugh. Now he hesitated? Now? After everything? I nodded lightly, as if it didn't matter at all. "Of course." Then, tilting my head slightly, I added, my voice soft, almost sweet, "Have fun with Sophia." That did it. His expression shifted completely. Shock, disbelief, something close to irritation. Maybe even a hint of guilt. But it wasn't strong enough to change anything. It never had been. "This isn't what you think," he said automatically, the same empty defense he had used countless times before. I simply smiled. I didn't say anything. And that was the truth. I didn't accuse him. I didn't question him. I didn't demand anything. Because I didn't need to anymore. He stood there for another second, as if waiting for me to break, to take it back, to become the woman he was used to controlling with silence and distance. I didn't. Finally, he grabbed his coat. The decision was made. Again. Always the same. He walked toward the door, his steps slightly slower this time, as if expecting me to call out to him. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe too loudly. The door opened, then closed. The sound echoed through the room, sharp and final, and just like that, he was gone. Again. Silence followed, but this silence was different. It wasn't suffocating. It wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. I exhaled slowly, the breath leaving my lungs in a long, controlled release, as if I had been holding it for an entire lifetime. Finally. The words slipped out, barely audible. My shoulders relaxed, tension I didn't even realize I carried melting away little by little. I leaned back slightly, letting my hands fall into my lap, staring down at the pristine white fabric of my dress. I'm free. The realization settled into my chest, warm and unfamiliar. Free from waiting, free from hoping, free from loving someone who would never choose me. A soft laugh escaped my lips. Not bitter, not broken, just relieved. So this is what it feels like. My gaze drifted toward the door, now closed, no longer a symbol of abandonment, but of release. In my previous life, that door had been the beginning of my downfall. Tonight, it was the end of it. I stood up slowly, the dress rustling around me, and walked toward the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked the same. Same face, same eyes, same fragile beauty. But there was something different now, something colder, stronger. My reflection met my gaze without hesitation. "You won't cry this time," I whispered to myself. "You won't beg." My fingers lifted, brushing lightly against my cheek, tracing the place where tears had once fallen endlessly. Dry, untouched. "And you will never love him again." The words felt like a contract, final, unbreakable. I turned away from the mirror, walking toward the window, pulling the curtains aside slightly. The night stretched endlessly beyond the glass, dark and quiet, the distant city lights flickering like 1,000 possibilities waiting to be claimed. In my previous life, everything had ended here. This room, this night, this choice. But now, this was where everything would begin. My lips curved again, this time just a little more real. Not soft, not gentle, but certain. "Ryan," I murmured under my breath, almost thoughtfully, "you made the same choice." My eyes darkened slightly, the calm surface hiding something far deeper. Now watch me make mine. Somewhere in the distance, a faint echo of laughter from the wedding guests drifted up again, but it no longer belonged to me. I let the curtain fall back into place, shutting it out completely. Behind me, the room remained untouched, frozen in time. But I wasn't. I walked toward the door slowly, deliberately, each step steady, each movement filled with purpose. I didn't look back. Not at the bed, not at the dress, not at the life I had just walked away from. Because this time, I was the one leaving first. Morning came too quietly, as if the world itself was unsure whether it should disturb the aftermath of a night that had rewritten fate. Pale sunlight slipped through the curtains, washing the room in a soft, indifferent glow, illuminating everything exactly as it had been left behind, untouched, pristine, meaningless. The rose petals had begun to wilt. The candles had burned down into uneven wax. The bed remained perfectly made on one side, empty on the other. I stood by the window, already dressed. Not in white, not anymore. The wedding dress was gone, folded, discarded. Just another costume I would never wear again. In its place, I wore something simple, clean, sharp. A version of myself that belonged to reality, not illusion. My reflection in the glass looked composed. Too composed for a bride the morning after her wedding night. But I wasn't that bride anymore. I picked up my phone, scrolling through the contacts with steady fingers, stopping at a name I had once hesitated to call. Not this time. The line rang once, twice, then, "Miss Elena?" "Prepare the documents." My voice was calm, direct, leaving no room for misunderstanding. "Divorce, asset separation, effective immediately." There was a brief silence on the other end, a pause filled with unspoken surprise, but professionalism quickly returned. "Understood. I'll have everything ready within the hour." "Good." I ended the call without another word. No hesitation, no second thoughts, because I had already lived the consequences of waiting, and I refused to repeat them. I turned, walking across the room, my gaze sweeping over the space one last time. Not with nostalgia, not with regret, but with clarity. This room had been the beginning of my destruction once. Now it would simply be a place I passed through, nothing more. I moved efficiently, drawer by drawer, document by document. Everything I had memorized from my previous life came back with frightening precision. Account numbers, hidden clauses, joint assets that had been used against me, traps disguised as trust. My fingers slid open a locked compartment in the dresser. Still there. Of course it was. A faint smile touched my lips as I pulled out the folder. My name, my assets. Everything that had once been slowly taken from me, piece by piece, under the illusion of marriage. Not this time. I laid the papers out across the table, organizing them with quiet precision. Shares, private accounts, properties transferred under my name before the marriage. Legal boundaries that had once been blurred, now sharpened into weapons. "You won't touch any of this again," I murmured softly, more to myself than anyone else. The clock ticked steadily on the wall. Every second felt purposeful, controlled. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting to life. I was directing it. By the time the lawyer arrived, everything was ready. There was no chaos, no confusion, only order. He stepped into the room, clearly trying to mask his surprise at the situation, but his eyes gave him away. "Miss Elena, this is quite sudden." "No," I replied calmly, sliding the documents toward him. "This is long overdue." He said nothing more after that, only nodded, sitting down and reviewing the papers, his expression gradually shifting from mild concern to quiet respect. "Everything is remarkably thorough," he admitted. "It will be difficult for the other party to contest." That's the point. My tone was flat, almost indifferent, because this wasn't revenge, not yet. This was protection, something I should have done from the beginning. Footsteps echoed faintly from the hallway, slow, heavy, familiar. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. The door opened. Ryan stepped in. His tie was loose, his expression tired, his eyes carrying the remnants of a night spent elsewhere. Not here, never here. He stopped when he saw us, saw the papers, saw me. Something shifted in his gaze, confusion first, then irritation. "What is this?" he asked, his voice edged with tension. I finally looked at him, really looked at him, without emotion, without expectation, without love. Divorce papers. The words landed cleanly between us. No hesitation, no softness, just truth. He frowned, stepping closer. What are you talking about? I tilted my head slightly, studying him as if he were the one being unreasonable. We're ending this. Silence. Thick. Disbelieving. Elena, he said slowly, his voice tightening, this isn't funny. A faint smile touched my lips, but there was no humor in it. I'm not joking. His jaw clenched. You're overreacting. There it was, the dismissal, the arrogance, the assumption that my feelings were temporary, irrational, that I would calm down, that I would stay. I slid the pen across the table toward him. Sign it. He didn't move. You're my wife. Legally, I corrected calmly. Not for long. His eyes darkened, frustration rising. This is about last night? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let the silence stretch just enough to make him uncomfortable. Then, no. My gaze locked onto his. This is about every night. That hit. I saw it. The flicker of something real. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. You're being unreasonable, he snapped, his patience wearing thin. Sophia was hurt. I had to go. Of course you did. My voice remained steady, unbothered. And you'll do it again. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped, because he knew. He knew I was right. I leaned back slightly, my posture relaxed, completely in control. So let's not waste each other's time. I gestured lightly toward the papers. Sign. His hands curled into fists at his sides. You'll regret this. I almost laughed. Almost. But instead, I simply held his gaze, calm and unwavering. No, I said softly. You will. The certainty in my voice seemed to unsettle him more than anger ever could. Because anger he understood. Emotion he could control. But this calm detachment, this was something he couldn't reach, couldn't manipulate, couldn't break. And for the first time, he hesitated. Not because he wanted to stay, but because he didn't understand why I was letting him go so easily. Finally, with a sharp exhale, he grabbed the pen. Fine. His signature was quick, aggressive, final. The sound of the pen scratching against paper echoed louder than it should have. When he finished, he tossed it aside carelessly. Don't come back crying, he muttered. I stood up slowly, gathering the documents with steady hands, not even sparing the signature a second glance. It was done. Just like that. No drama, no tears, no collapse. Just an ending. I won't, I replied simply. I turned to the lawyer. Finalize everything. Of course, he nodded, already organizing the paperwork, his movements efficient, respectful, as if he understood. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a severance, a clean break from something that should have ended long ago. Ryan watched me, his expression unreadable now, as if trying to figure out when exactly things had slipped out of his control. I walked past him without stopping, without slowing, without looking back, just like he had done the night before. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I didn't need to point it out. He would realize it eventually. Too late. Always too late. The hallway felt different as I stepped out, wider, lighter, as if the air itself had changed. Or maybe it was just me. I kept walking, each step steady, certain, free. Behind me, the door to that life remained open for a brief second, then closed, completely. And this time, I didn't stay to listen. The world didn't collapse the moment I left. That was the funny thing about destruction. It was never loud at the beginning. It crept in quietly, disguising itself as celebration, as victory, as the illusion of having finally won. From the outside, Everything in the Caldwell household looked better than ever, brighter, louder, more alive. And at the center of it all was her, Sophia. I watched the screen of my phone in silence, scrolling through the flood of posts that seemed to appear almost instantly, as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. Photos, videos, smiles that looked just a little too wide to be genuine. She stood in the grand living room of the Caldwell estate, draped in silk, surrounded by luxury that had once been mine by name, though never truly by heart. Now she wore it like a crown she believed she had earned. Finally, one caption read, home. My lips curved slightly, not in anger, not in jealousy, just amusement. Home? She didn't even understand what she had stepped into. In another video, she twirled lightly in front of the camera, showing off the chandelier, the marble floors, the endless space behind her. Ryan appeared briefly in the background, distracted, already on his phone, barely acknowledging her presence. But the audience wouldn't notice that. They never did. They only saw what they were meant to see. Perfection, romance, victory. I leaned back in my chair, the soft hum of the cafe around me grounding me in a completely different reality. No chandeliers, no marble floors. Just the quiet clinking of cups and low conversations. Real, unfiltered, honest. Enjoy it, I murmured under my breath, my gaze still fixed on the screen. While it lasts. Because I knew something she didn't. That house wasn't a prize. It was a battlefield. And she had just walked in unarmed. Days passed, then weeks. The posts continued. Expensive dinners, designer bags, lavish parties. Sophia was everywhere, laughing, posing, claiming space as if she had always belonged there. But cracks always start small. At first, it was subtle. A delayed post, a forced smile, a comment turned off. Then came the whispers. Not online, not where things were polished, but behind closed doors, inside meeting rooms, in the quiet tension of board discussions where decisions actually mattered. I didn't need to be there to know what was happening. I had lived it before. The Caldwell family wasn't built on love. It was built on control, power, image. And Sophia, she didn't understand any of those rules. She spent money like it proved her worth, interfered in conversations she didn't understand, smiled at the wrong people, spoke at the wrong time, pushed where she should have observed, and slowly the atmosphere shifted. I stirred my coffee absently, watching the ripple in the dark liquid, my thoughts calm, calculated. She's accelerating it, I said quietly to myself, faster than I expected. In my previous life, it had taken longer. Months of careful manipulation, silent pressure, strategic blame. This time, Sophia was doing half the work for me. Another notification appeared, a new post. I tapped it open. Sophia again, this time in the company's executive lounge, sitting at a table she had no right to occupy, a glass of wine in her hand, her caption dripping with arrogance. Learning the business side now. Wish me luck. I actually laughed, soft, genuine, for the first time. Good luck, I whispered. You're going to need more than that. Because that room, that table, those people, they weren't forgiving. And they certainly weren't kind. Especially not to someone who didn't belong. I set my phone down, letting the screen fade to black, my reflection staring back at me faintly for a brief second. Calm, composed, watching, always watching. In my previous life, I had been inside that storm, absorbing the damage, shielding Ryan, fixing problems before they exploded. I had been the buffer, the silent backbone that kept everything from falling apart. And when things finally did collapse, I had taken the blame. Not this time. This time, there was no buffer, no shield, no one to clean up the mess. Just Ryan and Sophia. Alone, together, exactly how they wanted it. My fingers tapped lightly against the table, a slow, thoughtful rhythm. You wanted her, I murmured. Now you get all of her. The image of Ryan's face from that morning flashed briefly in my mind. The irritation, the confidence, the certainty that I would regret leaving, that I would come back, that I would need him. A faint smirk touched my lips. I wonder. I leaned back slightly, crossing my arms, my gaze drifting toward the window where the city stretched endlessly beyond the glass. How long it'll take before you realize. My eyes darkened just slightly, the calm surface hiding something far colder beneath. You lost the wrong person. Somewhere far away, in a house filled with too much light and too many lies, voices were beginning to rise. Not loud enough to be heard by the world, not yet, but loud enough to matter. A disagreement over money, a question about a decision, a sharp comment that lingered a second too long. Small things, insignificant on their own, but together, they built pressure. And pressure always needed somewhere to go. I picked up my phone again, not to check, not to scroll, but simply to hold it, the weight of it grounding me in the present. I didn't need updates anymore. I already knew the script. The only difference was, this time, I wasn't the one trapped inside it. I was outside, watching, waiting, choosing. A soft exhale left my lips, slow and steady. Last time, I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. You used me as your shield. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. This time, my gaze lifted, sharp, certain. You'll face everything alone. The cafe door opened somewhere behind me, a soft chime ringing out, people coming and going, life continuing as if nothing monumental was unfolding just beneath the surface of it all. And maybe that was the most satisfying part. Revenge didn't need to be loud. It didn't need to be immediate. Sometimes, the most perfect revenge was simply stepping aside and letting them destroy themselves. My lips curved again, slow, deliberate, inevitable. Let the game begin. Collapse never starts with a crash. It starts with a decision that feels right in the moment. Profitable, bold, necessary. And then, quietly, it begins to rot from the inside. I didn't need to sit in Caldwell's boardroom to know the exact moment it happened. I could almost see it. Ryan standing at the head of the table, jaw tight, pride louder than reason. Sophia beside him, smiling like she understood far more than she actually did. A proposal placed on the table. High risk, high return. Too fast, too careless. In my previous life, I had stopped it. I had run the numbers, pointed out the flaws, negotiated safer terms, delayed the decision until it made sense. I had been the voice of restraint, the one who said no when everyone else wanted to hear yes. This time, I wasn't there, and no one else knew how to say no to him. Approved, I whispered softly, staring at the spreadsheet glowing on my laptop screen, my fingers resting lightly against the edge as if I could feel the ripple effect already unfolding. The investment went through, the money moved, and just like that, the first crack formed. It didn't show immediately, of course not. At first, everything looked fine. Better than fine. The reports came in strong, numbers rising, confidence building. Sophia celebrated publicly. Another post, another caption filled with pride she hadn't earned. Big moves, big future. I almost admired the irony, because behind those numbers was a ticking clock. I closed the file slowly, leaning back in my chair, my gaze drifting toward the skyline beyond my office window. My office, not theirs, not his, mine. Clean, independent, untouchable. 3 weeks, I murmured quietly, maybe 4. That was all it would take. Markets shifted, partners hesitated, one delayed payment turned into 2. One uncertain report turned into a flagged audit. And then the dominoes started to fall. The first call came earlier than I expected. My phone lit up on the desk, the name flashing across the screen like a ghost from a life I had already buried. Ryan. I stared at it for a moment, silent, unmoving, letting it ring once, twice, 3 times until it stopped. The silence that followed felt deliberate, controlled, a boundary drawn without a single word. A few seconds later, it rang again. This time, I reached out, not to answer, just to turn the phone face down. "Not yet," I said softly, because this wasn't the moment he deserved my attention. Not while he still thought this was temporary. Not while he still believed he could fix it. The real collapse hadn't begun yet, and I wanted him to feel every second of it. Days passed. The tone of the updates shifted. Subtly at first, then all at once. Losses. Unexpected, unexplained. Contracts that should have closed didn't. Partners who had been loyal pulled back. One major deal gone overnight. That one hurt. I knew it would. I had built that relationship myself in my previous life. Carefully, patiently. It had taken years, and it only took one wrong move to destroy it. I traced the edge of my coffee cup slowly, the warmth grounding me as I watched the reports update in real time. "You should have listened," I murmured, not with anger, but with certainty. Because this wasn't sabotage, not entirely. This was consequence, the natural result of arrogance meeting reality. Still, I hadn't been completely passive. A quiet meeting here, a subtle suggestion there, old connections revisited, opportunities redirected. Nothing obvious, nothing traceable, just enough to accelerate the inevitable. My phone buzzed again, a message this time. "Ryan, we need to talk." I didn't open it. Didn't need to. Another followed. "Elena, this is serious." A pause. Then, "Please." I stared at the word longer than I expected. Please. The first crack in him. Small, but real. My expression didn't change. My fingers didn't move. And slowly, I locked the screen. "Now you remember how to ask," I whispered. But I still didn't answer, because asking wasn't enough. Not anymore. Not after everything. Somewhere across the city, in a glass tower that was beginning to feel less stable by the hour, Ryan was losing control. Meetings running longer, voices getting sharper, pressure building from every direction. And beside him, Sophia, still smiling in public, still pretending everything was fine. But I could already see the shift in her posts. Less frequent, more defensive. Comments turned off completely now. The illusion was cracking, and people were starting to notice. I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker on one by one as evening settled in, my reflection faintly visible against the glass. Calm, unshaken, untouched by the chaos unfolding just beyond my reach. "This is where it begins," I said quietly to myself. Not the end, not yet, but the part where it becomes impossible to stop, where every choice leads to a worse outcome than the last, where desperation replaces confidence, and mistakes multiply. My phone buzzed again, this time a call. I glanced down. Ryan, again. I let it ring, and ring, and ring, until finally I picked it up, not to speak, just to listen. Silence on the other end, then his voice, lower than I had ever heard it before, rough, unsteady. "Elena," a pause, a breath. "Can we meet?" I closed my eyes briefly, not from weakness, but from the weight of déjà vu pressing in around me. In my previous life, this had been the moment I ran back, the moment I tried to fix everything, the moment I chose him over myself. My eyes opened slowly, clear, certain. No. One word, quiet, final. The silence on the other end stretched painfully. "It's just business," he tried again, grasping for control. "We need your—" I ended the call. No hesitation, no explanation, just an ending, again. I lowered the phone, placing it gently back on the table, my movements slow, deliberate. "You don't need me," I murmured softly. "You chose that." My gaze lifted once more to the city beyond the glass, the lights now fully alive, glittering like 1,000 separate stories unfolding at once. Now deal with it. Somewhere far away, something invisible cracked just a little bit wider, and this time, I didn't step in to hold it together. News travels fast when it benefits someone, faster when it can be used as leverage, and fastest when it comes wrapped in something as powerful as a child. I didn't hear it from Ryan. Of course not. By the time it reached me, it had already spread through social circles, business whispers, and carefully curated headlines disguised as personal joy. Sophia was pregnant. I stared at the message on my screen for a long moment, my expression unreadable, my fingers still against the edge of the phone as if even the smallest movement might disturb the calm I had built so carefully. Then slowly, I smiled. "There it is," I murmured softly. "The same move." In my previous life, this had been the turning point, the moment everything became irreversible, the moment she secured her place, not through love, not through loyalty, but through necessity. A child, a chain no one could easily break. Back then, Ryan had chosen responsibility, chosen guilt, chosen the path that pushed me out completely. But this time, everything was different, because this time, he had nothing left to protect. No stable company, no rising empire, no power worth attaching herself to, just pressure, debt, and a future that was already cracking beneath his feet. I tapped the screen lightly, opening the post. Sophia stood in soft lighting, one hand resting gently on her still flat stomach, her smile radiant, almost triumphant. "Our baby," the caption read, followed by a heart, a ring emoji, and just enough implication to spark speculation. Comments flooded beneath it. Congratulations, envy, curiosity, assumptions of a wedding soon to follow. I scrolled slowly, taking it all in, not as someone hurt, not as someone jealous, but as someone observing a predictable pattern unfold exactly as expected. "You're early this time," I whispered, almost thoughtfully. "Desperate?" Because that's what it felt like. Not strategy, not timing. Desperation. Shikekni too. The instability, the shift, the way things were slipping out of control. And so she reached for the strongest card she had. A child. But a card only works if the other player still has something to lose. I set the phone down gently, leaning back into my chair, my gaze drifting upward as I let the silence settle around me. In another place, another version of this story, this news would have shattered me, broken whatever remained of my composure, forced me into a position where I had to fight, to beg, to compete for something that was never truly mine. Not anymore. Now, it was just information, useful, predictable, almost convenient. My phone buzzed again, this time not a message, a call. I didn't need to check to know how it was, but I did anyway. Ryan, of course. I let it ring longer than usual, my fingers resting lightly against the surface of the desk, my mind already several steps ahead of whatever he was about to say. Then, finally, I answered. "Elena." His voice was strained, the weight of everything pressing down on every syllable. No confidence, no control, just tension. "You've heard?" I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch just enough to make him uncomfortable. Then, "Congratulations," I said calmly. Too calmly. He exhaled sharply, frustration bleeding through. "This isn't what it looks like." I almost laughed. Almost. "It looks like a pregnancy," I replied lightly. "Those are usually quite straightforward." A pause. Then, "I didn't plan this." His voice dropped lower, quieter, as if admitting something he didn't want to face. That made me smile. Not because it was amusing, but because it confirmed everything. He wasn't happy. Not like last time. Not proud. Not protective. Just trapped. "That sounds like your problem," I said softly. The words landed harder than I intended, but I didn't take them back. I didn't soften them, because they were true. "Elena," he said again, this time with something closer to desperation creeping in. "Things are complicated right now." "They always are," I replied. My tone remained steady, unshaken, especially when you make bad decisions. Silence, heavy, pressing. I could almost hear the thoughts running through his head, the frustration, the confusion, the slow realization that I wasn't reacting the way he expected, that I wasn't stepping in, wasn't offering solutions, wasn't saving him. "We need to talk," he said finally. There it was again. Not, "I want to see you." Not, "I miss you." Just need. Always need. Never want. My fingers tapped lightly against the desk, once, twice, 3 times, before I responded. No. The word came out just as calmly as before, just as final. Elena. I ended the call. Again. No explanation, no hesitation. Just a line drawn, clear and unbreakable. I set the phone aside, my gaze drifting toward the window where the city moved on as it always did, unaffected, indifferent, endless. Somewhere out there, Sophia was still smiling for the world, still playing her role, but behind closed doors, things were already unraveling. I didn't need to see it to know. I could imagine it perfectly. The arguments, the raised voices, the accusations. You said everything was under control. I didn't expect this. Then fix it. Pressure from the company, from the family, from the future neither of them had planned for properly. And in the middle of it all, a child. Not as a blessing, not as hope, but as weight. My reflection stared back at me faintly in the glass, my expression calm, almost detached, but my eyes, sharper now, colder. Last time, I whispered softly, you used that child to secure your place. My lips curved slightly, not in cruelty, but in quiet certainty. Let's see if it still works, when there's nothing left to hold on to. Because this time, the story wouldn't repeat. This time, there was no stable ground, no safety net, no one waiting to sacrifice themselves to keep everything from falling apart. Just 2 people, clinging to something that couldn't save them. I picked up my coat slowly, slipping it on with deliberate ease, my movements unhurried, controlled. Outside, the night was beginning to settle in, cool and quiet, the perfect contrast to the chaos building elsewhere. You wanted everything, I murmured as I reached for the door. Now you get all of it. My hand paused briefly on the handle, just for a second, just long enough for one final thought to surface, clear and undeniable. And this time, my eyes hardened slightly, the last trace of anything soft disappearing completely. I won't be there to catch you when you fall. The door opened, and I stepped forward, leaving them behind, exactly where they chose to be. The fall doesn't feel real until you hit the ground. By the time the news broke publicly, it was already too late to fix anything. Caldwell Group, once a name that carried weight, influence, certainty, was now being dragged through headlines with words like collapse, investigation, and irreversible loss. I stood in the quiet of my living room, the morning light spilling across polished floors, my phone resting in my hand as the final confirmation appeared on screen. Bankruptcy filed, assets frozen, legal action pending. Complete, final. I didn't react immediately. I simply stared at the words, letting them settle, letting the silence stretch long enough to absorb the weight of what had just ended. So it's over, I murmured softly. Not with triumph, not with excitement, just acknowledgement. Because this wasn't a surprise, it was an outcome, one that had been set in motion long before any of them realized it. In my previous life, this had been the moment I broke myself trying to save them. Running between lawyers, negotiating deals, sacrificing everything I had left just to keep the company alive a little longer. Just enough for him, for his name, for his pride. And in the end, I still lost everything. This time, I did nothing. And everything still ended exactly the same. Maybe worse. A soft knock echoed through the space, pulling me out of my thoughts. Slow, hesitant, out of place in a house that rarely received unexpected visitors. I didn't move right away. I didn't need to guess who it was. My fingers tightened slightly around the phone before I set it down, the screen fading into black as I turned toward the door. Each step I took was steady, unhurried, as if I were walking towards something inevitable rather than unexpected. The knock came again, slightly louder this time, more desperate. I stopped just short of the door, my hand hovering over the handle for a brief second, my reflection faintly visible in the polished surface beside it. Calm, controlled, untouched. Then I opened it. Ryan stood there, but not the Ryan I once knew. Not the man who walked away from me without hesitation. not the man who believed he was untouchable. This version of him was broken. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his eyes hollow, red-rimmed from exhaustion or something worse. The confidence was gone, the arrogance shattered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We simply stood there, two people who had once shared a life, now separated by everything that had happened since. Then he moved. Not forward, not with authority, but down, slowly, unsteadily, until his knees hit the ground. The sound echoed louder than it should have. I didn't react, not outwardly, but something deep inside me stilled. Elena. His voice cracked, rough, unfamiliar, stripped of everything it once carried. I was wrong. The words hung in the air between us, heavy, raw, too late. I looked down at him, my expression unchanged, my hands resting loosely at my sides. No anger, no satisfaction, just distance. I know, I replied quietly. He flinched slightly at how easily I said it, as if he had expected resistance, accusation, something emotional. But I had none left to give him. Please, he continued, his head lowering, his voice breaking further with every word. Just hear me out. I said nothing, didn't stop him, didn't encourage him, just let him speak, because this time, I wasn't the one chasing. The company, it's gone, he said, the admission heavy, bitter. Everything is gone. I remained silent because I already knew, because it didn't change anything. I thought I could fix it, he went on, his hands clenching against the ground, desperation creeping into every movement. I thought I didn't need you. There it was, the truth, simple, clear, too late. My gaze lowered slightly, studying him, not as someone I loved, not even as someone I hated, but as someone I no longer recognized. And now? I asked softly. He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with something I had once begged to see. Regret. Real. Undeniable. Now I know I was wrong, he said. I need you, Elena. The words should have meant something. Once, they would have destroyed me. Now, they felt empty, hollow, like echoes from a life I had already buried. You always did, I replied calmly. His breath hitched slightly, as if he hadn't expected that answer. Then come back, he said quickly, almost urgently, hope flickering where it didn't belong. We can fix this, together, like before. I almost smiled. Almost. But instead, I tilted my head slightly, my gaze sharpening just enough to cut through whatever illusion he was still holding on to. Before, I repeated softly, you mean when I fixed everything, and you took the credit? He froze. When I protected you, and you abandoned me? Silence. Crushing. Absolute. When I loved you. My voice lowered slightly, quieter now, but far more dangerous. And you chose her? His expression broke completely then, whatever fragile hope he had left shattering under the weight of reality. Elena, I cut him off with a single small movement of my hand. Enough. No more words. Because none of them mattered anymore. You made your choice, I said simply. Now live with it. The finality in my voice left no space for negotiation, no room for hope, just truth. Behind him, another sound echoed faintly, hurried footsteps, uneven, desperate. A figure appeared at the edge of the path leading up to the house. Sophia. Her hair was disheveled, her face pale, her body visibly heavier now, the curve of her pregnancy undeniable beneath the loose fabric she wore. Her eyes locked onto Ryan first, then shifted to me. And in that single moment, everything changed. Ryan, she called out, her voice sharp, strained, breaking through the fragile silence. He didn't move, didn't turn, didn't respond. That alone said everything. Her expression twisted, confusion, anger, fear, all colliding at once as she hurried closer, one hand gripping her stomach as if to steady herself. What are you doing here? She demanded, her voice rising, panic creeping in beneath the surface. We need to talk about the lawyers, the money, She stopped abruptly as she reached us, her eyes flicking between his kneeling figure and my still, composed stance. Understanding hit her slowly, then all at once. "You came to her?" The accusation cut through the air like a blade. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he still didn't look at her. "Ryan," she snapped, louder now, more desperate. "Say something!" He closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering what little patience he had left. Then, finally, he spoke, but not to me. "Go home, Sophia." The words were cold, distant, final. She stared at him, disbelief flooding her expression. "What?" "Just go," he said, his voice sharper now, edged with frustration he didn't bother to hide anymore. "I'll deal with it later." "Deal with it?" she repeated, her voice shaking. "I'm carrying your child." That hit. Not me, him. I saw it, the flicker of conflict, of irritation, of something dangerously close to resentment. And then he looked away. That was the moment everything truly broke, for her. "You said you would take responsibility," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of everything collapsing around her. "I am," he snapped back, harsher than necessary. "Just not right now." Not right now. The words echoed, hollow, cruel, familiar, because I had heard them before, just from the other side. Sophia staggered back slightly, as if physically struck by the realization settling in her chest. The same realization I had once faced, that she had never truly been chosen, just convenient. My gaze shifted between them, quiet, observant, detached. Two people bound by choices neither of them could undo. Two people finally seeing each other clearly. Too late. Always too late. I turned slightly, stepping back just enough to create distance, not just physically, but completely. "You should go," I said calmly. Not to Ryan, not entirely, but to both of them, because neither of them belonged here, not anymore. Ryan's head snapped up, panic flashing briefly across his face. "Elena, wait." But I was already closing the door, slowly, deliberately. The last thing I saw was him still on his knees and her standing there, alone. The door shut, the sound echoed through the house, final and absolute. And just like that, I left them exactly where they had left me. Revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like silence, like walking away without looking back, like living a life so complete that the past no longer has a place in it. Weeks passed after that day, then months. The world moved on, as it always does, carrying with it the remains of everything that had once seemed so permanent. Caldwell Group became nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered in business circles, a name that once meant power, now reduced to a lesson about arrogance, mismanagement, and inevitable collapse. Lawsuits followed, investigations deepened. Every decision Ryan had made during those final months was pulled apart, examined, exposed. And when the truth surfaced, it wasn't kind. Misused funds, questionable deals, desperation disguised as strategy. He didn't go to prison, not quite, but everything else, gone. Reputation, connections, influence. The world that had once bent around him no longer even acknowledged his existence. As for Sophia, her story didn't end the way she had imagined either. There was no wedding, no grand announcement, no perfect family moment to seal her victory. Just a small hospital room, harsh lighting, quiet disappointment. She gave birth alone. No cameras, no celebration. Just the sound of a newborn crying into a world that had nothing prepared for it. Ryan didn't come, not because he didn't know, but because by then he had nothing left to give, not to her, not to anyone. And me? I watched none of it directly. I didn't need to. Updates came naturally, through networks, through conversations, through the quiet flow of information that always finds its way to those who know where to listen. But I never reached out, never interfered, never stepped back into that world, because my story had already moved on. The glass walls of my office reflected the city skyline, endless and alive, the hum of success surrounding me in ways that felt earned, not inherited. Contracts signed under my name, partnerships built on respect, not obligation. Every step forward, mine, completely mine. I stood by the window, my reflection faint against the glass, my expression calm, grounded, untouched by the ghosts of what had once defined me. "It's really over," I murmured softly, more to myself than anyone else. And this time, it wasn't painful to say. It was freeing. A soft knock came at the door behind me, gentle, respectful. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Come in." The door opened quietly. He stepped inside, not with the overwhelming presence Ryan once carried, not with arrogance or expectation, but with something far rarer: ease, stability, respect. "You're still working?" His voice was warm, light, carrying a hint of amusement. I turned slightly, meeting his gaze, and for the first time in a long time, my smile reached my eyes. Just finishing up." He walked closer, stopping at a comfortable distance, not too near, not invasive, just enough to be present without demanding space that wasn't his. That alone said everything about the difference between them. "You've been saying that for an hour," he said softly. I was waiting. Waiting. Not demanding, not assuming. Just there. I picked up my coat, slipping it on with an ease that mirrored the life I had built for myself, my movements unhurried, unburdened. "Then I shouldn't keep you any longer." He smiled slightly, the expression easy, genuine, untouched by calculation. "I don't mind." I paused for a brief second, studying him, not as someone I needed, not as someone I depended on, but as someone I chose. That was the difference. That was everything. We walked out together, side by side, the city stretching before us in soft evening light, alive with possibility, untouched by the weight of the past. No chains, no expectations, just forward. As we stepped into the quiet rhythm of the night, a memory surfaced, not sharp, not painful, just distant. A closed door, a man on his knees, a version of me who once would have turned back. I didn't. I kept walking, because I wasn't that person anymore, and I never would be again. "Elena?" His voice pulled me back gently. You okay?" I glanced at him, then ahead, the faintest smile touching my lips. "I am." And I meant it, completely, fully, without hesitation. The wind brushed softly against my face as we moved forward, carrying away the last remnants of a story that no longer belonged to me. Somewhere, far behind, echoes of regret still lingered, but they no longer had the power to reach me, because this time, I had chosen differently. Not love that needed to be proven, not loyalty that demanded sacrifice, but myself, always myself. I slowed slightly, just enough to take in the moment, the quiet, the freedom that felt almost surreal after everything I had lived through. "In another life," I whispered softly, more a thought than a statement. I lost everything trying to hold on. My fingers curled lightly at my side, grounding myself in the present. In this one, my gaze lifted, steady, certain, unshaken. I gained everything by letting go. He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't need to. Some things didn't require explanation. Some things were simply understood, and that was enough. We continued walking, the distance between who I was and who I had become stretching further with every step, until the past was no longer something I carried, but something I had left behind completely. My lips curved one last time, soft but unbreakable, as the final truth settled quietly into place. Never hold on to someone who wants to leave. The city lights flickered around us, endless, alive, full of stories still waiting to be told. "Open the door." I exhaled slowly, the words steady, final, free, and smile as they walk away. And this time, I did.